What happens when a seasoned television host decides she has had enough of carefully crafted narratives and polished PR responses? What happens when years of media training collide with raw, unfiltered truth? Today we are diving into one of the most explosive moments in daytime television history, a confrontation so intense that it ended with a guest being asked to leave the studio. This is the story of how Tamron Hall completely dismantled Meghan Markle on live television, exposing contradictions and inconsistencies that left viewers stunned and the former royal scrambling for answers. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think about celebrities who change their stories. Now let's dive in. The atmosphere in Studio 6A was electric as Tamron Hall adjusted her notes one final time. Across from her, Meghan Markle sat poised in her carefully chosen cream-colored blazer, her media training evident in every calculated gesture. The interview was supposed to be a softball promotional segment for Meghan's latest charitable initiative, but Tamron had other plans. "Meghan, thank you for being here today," Tamron began, her voice warm but carrying an undertone that suggested this would not be the typical celebrity puff piece. "I want to start by talking about your recent comments regarding privacy and the media. You have spoken extensively about wanting to protect your family from intrusive coverage." Meghan nodded, slipping into her rehearsed response mode. "Absolutely, Tamron. Privacy is fundamental to any family, and when you have children, that becomes even more important. We have always tried to maintain boundaries while still engaging with causes that matter to us." Tamron leaned forward slightly, her journalist instincts kicking in. "That is interesting, because I have been looking at your recent activities, and I am curious about something. You have spoken about wanting privacy, yet you have also signed deals with major streaming platforms, participated in high-profile interviews, and maintained a very public presence through your various ventures. How do you reconcile wanting privacy while simultaneously courting publicity?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Meghan's smile flickered for just a moment before she recovered. "Well, I think there is a difference between controlling your own narrative and having your story told for you. When we engage with media on our own terms, it allows us to share what we want to share while protecting what should remain private." "But Meghan," Tamron pressed, her tone becoming more pointed, "that sounds like you want it both ways. You want the benefits of media attention when it serves your purposes, but you criticize the same media when the coverage is not to your liking. Do not you think that is somewhat hypocritical?" Meghan's posture stiffened, and for the first time, genuine irritation flashed across her face. "I would not call it hypocritical, Tamron. I would call it being strategic about protecting my family while still using my platform for good." "Strategic," Tamron repeated, letting the word hang between them. "Let's talk about strategy then. Your approach to media relations has been quite calculated, has it not? The timing of certain revelations, the choice of friendly interviewers, the selective sharing of personal details, it all seems very orchestrated. Every public figure has to be thoughtful about how they engage with media," Meghan replied, her voice becoming slightly defensive. "That is not manipulation. That is just being smart about communication." Tamron shuffled her papers deliberately, a move that television veterans know often signals a shift to more serious territory. "Speaking of communication, I want to address some inconsistencies I have noticed in your various interviews over the years. You have given different versions of certain events, and I think our viewers deserve some clarity." Meghan's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. "I am not sure what you mean by different versions. I have always been truthful about my experiences." "Have you, though?" Tamron's question was delivered with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. "Because I have done my homework, Meghan, and there are some discrepancies that I think need to be addressed. For instance, your timeline regarding certain conversations and events has shifted depending on the interview and the interviewer. The studio seemed to grow quieter, as if even the camera operators sensed the tension building between the two women." Meghan shifted in her chair, her media training battling with her growing discomfort. "Tamron, I think you might be misremembering, or perhaps taking things out of context," Meghan said, attempting to regain control of the narrative. "Memory can be subjective, especially when dealing with emotional or traumatic experiences." Tamron was not buying it. Memory can indeed be subjective, but facts are facts. And the facts, Meghan, tell a different story than some of your recollections. Would you like me to be specific? I would appreciate you being specific because I stand by everything I have said, Meghan replied, though her voice carried less conviction than her words suggested. Tamron reached for a folder beside her chair. The movement, deliberate and theatrical. She knew how to build drama, how to create moments that would keep viewers glued to their screens. Let's start with your claims about being unprepared for royal life. In multiple interviews, you have stated that no one explained the protocols. To you, that you were thrown into the deep end without guidance. That is correct, Meghan affirmed, seeming relieved to be on familiar talking points. But that contradicts information from palace sources and even some of your own previous statements, Tamron continued. There are records of extensive briefings, protocol training sessions, and preparation meetings. How do you explain that discrepancy? Meghan's composure began to crack slightly. Palace sources are not always reliable. They have their own agenda, and they were not in the room for every conversation I had or did not have. Fair enough, Tamron conceded. But what about your own words? In an earlier interview, you mentioned receiving guidance and training. Yet, later, you claimed you received none. Which version is accurate? The question was a direct hit, and Meghan felt it. She paused, clearly calculating her response. I think there might be some confusion about the timeline or the context of those statements. Or there might be some confusion about the truth, Tamron shot back, her journalistic instincts now in full control. Meghan, I have been doing this for a long time, and I can spot inconsistencies. The question is whether you are going to acknowledge them or continue to deflect. Meghan's carefully constructed facade was beginning to crumble. I am not deflecting anything, Tamron. I am trying to provide context that you seem determined to ignore. Context is important, Tamron agreed, but so is consistency. And frankly, Meghan, your story keeps changing depending on who is asking. The questions and what narrative you are trying to support at the time. The accusation hit its mark, and Meghan's response revealed the frustration that had been building throughout the interview. That is absolutely unfair. And frankly, I did not come here to be attacked. You were not being attacked, Tamron replied, calmly. You were being asked legitimate questions that any journalist worth their salt would ask. The fact that you are interpreting accountability as an attack tells me everything I need to know about how you handle scrutiny. Meghan stood up partially in her chair, her composure finally breaking. I have handled plenty of scrutiny, more than most people could manage. What I have not signed up for is having my words twisted and my experiences minimized by someone who was not there. Sit down, Meghan, Tamron said firmly, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had controlled countless interviews over her career. We are not done here. Meghan reluctantly settled back into her chair, but her body language screamed defiance. Her perfectly manicured hands gripped the armrests, and her jaw was set in a way that suggested she was barely containing her anger. Tamron, meanwhile, looked completely in her element, like a predator who had just cornered her prey. Good, Tamron said, her tone deceptively calm. Now, let's continue our conversation about consistency. I want to talk about your relationship with your father. You have painted very different pictures of that relationship, depending on the audience and the timing. Meghan's eyes flashed with something dangerous. My relationship with my father is personal and complicated, and I do not appreciate having it dissected for entertainment. This is not entertainment, Meghan. This is journalism, Tamron replied sharply. And when you make your personal relationships part of your public narrative, when you use them to generate sympathy and support, they become fair game for examination. I have never used my family for sympathy, Meghan protested, though her voice lacked conviction. Tamron opened her folder and pulled out what appeared to be printed transcripts. Really? Because I have quotes here from multiple interviews where you specifically discuss your father's behavior, your family dynamics, and how they affected you. You have used these stories to explain your decisions, to justify your actions, and to garner public support. How is that not using your family for sympathy? Meghan shifted uncomfortably, realizing she had walked into a trap. Discussing my experiences is not the same as exploiting them. When people ask me direct questions about my life, I answer honestly. Honestly. Tamron's eyebrows raised in theatrical disbelief. Let's test that theory. In one interview, you described your father as loving, but flawed, someone who made mistakes, but ultimately cared about you. In another interview, you painted him as manipulative and unreliable, someone who betrayed your trust repeatedly. Which version is the honest one? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Meghan opened her mouth to respond, then closed, it clearly struggling to find an answer that would not contradict one of her previous statements. "People are complex, Tamron," she finally said. "My feelings about my father have evolved as I have learned more about his actions and their impact on my life." Evolved, or been crafted to fit whatever narrative you needed at the time? Pressed, because from where I sit, it looks like you adjust your family story based on what will generate the most sympathy. For whatever project or cause you are promoting, Meghan's composure cracked further. That is a terrible accusation to make about someone's relationship with their parent. You have no idea what I have been through, or how complicated these relationships can be. You are right. I do not know what you have been through, Tamron acknowledged, but I do know what you have said publicly, and what you have said publicly keeps changing. That is not complexity, Meghan. That is manipulation. The word hit like a physical blow. Meghan's face flushed, and for a moment, she looked genuinely stunned. "I cannot believe you just called me manipulative on national television." "I did not call you manipulative," Tamron corrected. "I said your inconsistent storytelling looks like manipulation. There is a difference, though I am starting to wonder if you see it that way." Meghan stood up abruptly, her chair rolling backward slightly. "I do not have to sit here and listen to this character assassination disguised as journalism. Sit down." Meghan Tamron commanded again, her voice carrying even more authority than before. "You agreed to this interview, and we are going to finish it properly. Running away when faced with difficult questions is exactly the kind of behavior that makes people question your credibility." "I am not running away," Meghan snapped, though she remained standing. "I am refusing to participate in what has clearly become a hit piece." Tamron leaned back in her chair, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "A hit piece? Meghan, I have asked you exactly 3 substantive questions about statements you made publicly. If you consider basic fact checking to be a hit piece, then maybe the problem is not with my questions, but with your answers. Your questions are loaded and designed to make me look bad," Meghan accused, her voice rising slightly. "My questions are designed to get to the truth," Tamron shot back. "If the truth makes you look bad, then perhaps you should reconsider some of the things you have said publicly." Meghan finally sat back down, but her posture remained rigid and defensive. "Fine. What exactly do you want from me, Tamron?" "I want honesty," Tamron replied simply. "I want you to acknowledge that your story has changed multiple times and explain why. I want you to take responsibility for the inconsistencies instead of deflecting and making excuses." "I have been honest about my experiences," Meghan insisted, though her voice had lost much of its earlier confidence. "Have you, though?" Tamron pulled out another document from her folder. "Let's talk about your claims regarding financial support. From the royal family, you have given conflicting accounts of whether you received funding, how much you received, and what it was used for. Can you explain these discrepancies?" Meghan's face went pale. This was clearly territory she had hoped to avoid. Financial arrangements within the royal family are private and complex. It is not as simple as you are making it sound. "I am not making it sound simple," Tamron replied. "I am pointing out that you have given different versions of the same events. In one interview, you suggested you were cut off financially and left to fend for yourselves. In another, you acknowledged receiving substantial support. Which version is accurate?" Meghan was clearly struggling now, her media training warring with her instinct to defend herself. "Both can be true depending on the time frame and the specific circumstances." "No, Meghan, both cannot be true," Tamron said firmly. "You either received financial support or you did not. You either were cut off or you were not. You cannot have it both ways just because it makes for a better story." "You are oversimplifying a very complex situation," Meghan protested weakly. "I am holding you accountable for your public statements," Tamron corrected, "something that apparently has not happened enough in your previous interviews." The observation stung, and Meghan's response revealed just how much I have been held accountable plenty. I have been scrutinized and criticized more than any public figure in recent memory. Scrutinized? Yes, Tamron agreed. but held accountable. That is debatable. Most of your interviews have been with friendly hosts who lobbed softball questions and allowed you to control the narrative. This might be the first time someone has actually challenged your version of events. Meghan's eyes blazed with anger. So this is what, some kind of gotcha journalism? Some attempt to boost your ratings by ambushing me? Tamron's response was swift and cutting. Meghan, if asking you to explain your own words constitutes an ambush, then you have bigger problems than inconsistent storytelling. This is basic journalism. The kind that used to be standard before celebrity culture made everyone afraid to ask hard questions. I did not sign up for this, Meghan said, her voice now carrying a note of desperation. You signed up for a television interview, Tamron replied coldly. What you apparently expected was a promotional opportunity, talking points without challenge. Unfortunately for you, that is not how real journalism works. Meghan looked around the studio as if searching for an escape route, or perhaps hoping someone would intervene. When no help materialized, she turned back to Tamron with barely concealed hostility. Are we almost done here? She asked through gritted teeth. Tamron smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Oh, Meghan, we are just getting started. I have barely scratched the surface of the inconsistencies in your public statements. We still need to discuss your claims about racism, your timeline regarding various conversations, and your characterization of your relationship with other family members. The color drained from Meghan's face as she realized this interrogation was far from over. Meghan took a deep breath, clearly trying to regain some semblance of control over the situation that had spiraled so far beyond her expectations. Her hands were trembling slightly now, though she tried to hide it by clasping them together in her lap. Tamron, I think we need to take a step back here, Meghan said, attempting to sound reasonable despite the panic in her eyes. This has become unnecessarily hostile, and I am not sure what you are trying to accomplish. Tamron was unmoved by the plea for mercy. What I am trying to accomplish is getting straight answers to straightforward questions, something you seem incapable of providing. Let's continue with your claims about racism within the royal family. I would prefer not to revisit that topic, Meghan said quickly, recognizing dangerous territory. I am sure you would prefer not to, Tamron replied with a cold smile. But you made those claims publicly. They had serious consequences for real people, and now you need to stand behind them. You alleged that there were concerns and conversations about your son's skin color. Can you be specific about who said what and when? Meghan's composure cracked visibly. I have already addressed this in previous interviews. I do not need to rehash every detail. Actually, you do, Tamron insisted, because your previous answers have been vague and evasive, and frankly, accusations of racism deserve specificity. If you are going to destroy people's reputations, you need to provide evidence. I never intended to destroy anyone's reputation, Meghan protested weakly. But that is exactly what happened, is it not? Tamron pressed. You made explosive allegations, allowed the media and public to speculate wildly about who might have made these comments, and then stepped back and watched while an entire institution was painted as racist. Do you take any responsibility for that outcome? Meghan shifted uncomfortably, clearly unprepared for this level of accountability. I shared my truth about conversations that happened. I cannot control how people interpret or respond to that information. Your truth, Tamron repeated, her voice dripping with skepticism. There it is again, that phrase you use whenever you want to avoid taking responsibility for the impact of your words. But here is the thing about truth, Meghan. It is not subjective. Either these conversations happened as you described them, or they did not. Of course they happened, Meghan snapped, her frustration finally boiling over. Do you think I would make something like that up? Tamron leaned forward, her eyes locked on Meghan's base on the pattern of inconsistencies we have already discussed. I honestly do not know what to believe anymore. You have changed your story so many times about so many different things that your credibility is essentially zero. The words hit like a slap across the face. Meghan's mouth fell open in shock, and for a moment, she seemed genuinely speechless. I cannot believe you just said that, she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. I cannot believe I had to say it, Tamron replied without missing a beat. But here we are. You have spent years crafting different versions of events depending on your audience and your agenda. And now, when faced with basic journalistic scrutiny, You are falling apart. Meghan stood up again, this time with more determination. I do not have to sit here and be insulted by someone who clearly had no intention of conducting a fair interview. Fair? Tamron's voice rose for the first time during the interview. You want to talk about fair? Is it fair to make serious allegations without providing specifics? Is it fair to change your story whenever it suits you? Is it fair to use your platform to destroy reputations while hiding behind vague language and emotional manipulation? I have never manipulated anyone, Meghan shouted, her careful composure completely shattered now. Everything you do is manipulation. Tamron shot back, rising from her own chair to match Meghan's energy. The way you craft your answers, the way you time your revelations, the way you play victim whenever someone asks you a hard question, it is all calculated, and frankly, it is insulting to anyone with half a brain. Meghan's face was flushed with anger and humiliation. I came here in good faith to discuss my charitable work, and instead, you have ambushed me with this character assassination disguised as journalism. You came here expecting another puff piece where you could recite your talking points without challenge, Tamron corrected. What you got was actual journalism, something you clearly have not experienced in quite some time. This is not journalism, Meghan spat. This is a hit job, and I am done participating in it. She turned toward the edge of the set, clearly intending to leave, but Tamron was not finished. Running away again, Meghan, Tamron called after her. Is that your solution to everything? When the questions get too hard, when people start asking for specifics, when your carefully constructed narrative starts falling apart, you just walk away. Meghan spun around, her eyes blazing with fury. I am not running away from anything. I am removing myself from a toxic situation that serves no constructive purpose. The only thing toxic here is your relationship with the truth. Tamron fired back. You have built an entire public persona on stories that keep changing, and when someone finally calls you on it, you want to paint yourself as the victim. Is pathetic. The studio fell silent, except for the hum of cameras still rolling. Meghan stood frozen, clearly torn between her desire to flee and her instinct to defend herself. The moment stretched on, tension crackling in the air like electricity. You know what, Tamron? Meghan said finally, her voice deadly quiet. You think you are some kind of journalistic hero, exposing the truth and holding people accountable. But all you are doing is tearing down someone who has already been through enough. Someone who has faced more scrutiny and criticism than you could ever imagine. Tamron was unmoved by the emotional appeal. Playing the victim card again, I see. Tell me, Meghan, do you ever take responsibility for anything? Do you ever acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, some of the criticism you face is deserved? I have taken plenty of responsibility, Meghan insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. When Tamron demanded, when have you ever admitted to being wrong about anything? When have you ever acknowledged that your version of events might be incomplete or inaccurate? I will wait. Meghan opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again, clearly unable to provide an example. That is what I thought, Tamron said with satisfaction. You talk about taking responsibility, but you have never actually done it. Every mistake is someone else's fault. Every criticism is unfair. Every challenge to your narrative is an attack. It is exhausting, Meghan. I do not have to listen to this anymore, Meghan said, her voice breaking slightly. She looked around, the studio desperately, as if searching for someone to rescue her from this nightmare. Tamron made the decision for her. You are absolutely right. You do not have to listen to this anymore, and frankly, neither do my viewers. This interview is over. She turned to look directly into the camera, her professional demeanor returning instantly. When we come back, we will be discussing something much more pleasant, I promise. Meghan stood there for a moment, clearly stunned that she was being dismissed so abruptly. You cannot just end the interview like that. I can, and I am, Tamron replied firmly. Security will escort you out. Thank you for coming, Meghan. It has been educational. As security personnel appeared at the edge of the set, Meghan's shock turned to indignation. This is unbelievable. You invite me on your show just to humiliate me, and now you are having me thrown out like some kind of criminal. I invited you on my show to answer questions about your public statements, Tamron corrected. The humiliation was entirely self-inflicted. You could have simply told the truth from the beginning, but instead, you chose to deflect, deny, and play victim. This is the result. Meghan looked around one last time, perhaps hoping for some last-minute intervention or support, but found none. The studio crew watched in professional silence as security gently but firmly guided her toward the exit. "This will not be forgotten," Meghan called over her shoulder as she was led away. "I certainly hope not," Tamron replied calmly. "Maybe next time you will think twice before expecting journalists to act as your personal publicists." As Meghan disappeared from view, Tamron straightened her jacket and sat back down, her composure completely intact. She looked directly into the camera with the confidence of someone who had just done exactly what she set out to do. "We will be right back with more of the Tamron Hall show," she said smoothly, as if nothing extraordinary had just happened. The camera stopped rolling, and the studio buzzed with the kind of energy that follows truly explosive television. Everyone present knew they had just witnessed something that would be talked about for years to come, a moment when careful media management collided with old-school journalism and lost spectacularly. What started as a routine promotional interview had become a masterclass in how quickly things can spiral when preparation meets accountability, when practiced talking points encounter persistent questioning, and when someone finally refuses to play along with a carefully orchestrated narrative. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments. Do you think celebrities should be held to a higher standard?